All right, so we are diving deep into educational system reform,
Oh, yeah,
a topic that I think is
definitely.
close to all of our
For
hearts.
sure.
And let me tell you, the sources you've provided
Yeah.
are incredible. I
It's
mean, I've
amazing.
got cutting-edge research, personal stories,
Yeah.
and we even have a global perspective. So get ready
Yeah.
to become experts on what it really takes to create a system that
And
works
kind of,
for everyone.
yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
The diversity of these sources is impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not just talking about theory here. We're going to
Mhm.
see how reform plays out
Yeah.
in classrooms, in communities,
Yeah.
in individual lives.
Exactly. So our mission today is
Okay.
to go beyond the headlines and really
Yeah,
understand the complexities of this issue.
for sure.
First up, we're tackling the pandemic's impact.
Mm,
It was a massive disruption, but also, as you'll see, a catalyst for change.
for sure.
We're going to start with a jaw-dropping statistic from FreeOps research.
All right.
In October 2020, 50 of the nation's largest school districts
Wow.
were closed to
Wow.
in-person learning.
It's hard to overstate the significance of that moment.
Yeah.
It was a real wake-up call for
Yeah.
many families, I think,
Yeah.
forcing them to confront the limitations of the traditional system and explore new options.
And they did.
They did.
We saw the rise of pandemic pods,
Yes.
small groups of students learning together outside of traditional schools.
Yeah.
It was an incredible display of grassroots innovation.
Interesting.
But as always, there were bumps in the road, for instance.
Right.
Some states classified these pods as daycare centers,
Oh, wow.
which created a whole slew of bureaucratic hurdles.
Gorgeous.
One example is Illinois,
Oh.
where this classification made it harder for pods to operate smoothly.
This brings us to a key theme that emerges throughout these sources,
Okay.
the tension between innovation and regulation.
Interesting.
How do we create a system that's flexible enough?
Yeah. To encourage new approaches
Right.
while also ensuring quality and accountability.
Right.
One potential solution that keeps popping up is education savings accounts, or ESAs.
Ah, yes. ESAs popularized by folks like Dan Lips
Yeah.
at FRAOPP.
Hmm.
The idea is to give families more control over their children's education dollars.
Yeah.
It's like a personalized education budget
Right.
that parents can use for tuition, tutoring, or even those innovative pods we were just talking about.
It's a powerful concept.
Yes.
And it aligns perfectly with the spirit of parental empowerment that
Yeah.
we're seeing in the wake of the pandemic.
Right. And it's not just about policy wonks and think tanks.
Hmm.
We also have the incredibly insightful Dr. Daryl Reynolds sharing his personal experiences with us.
Oh, wow.
He talks about growing up in Alabama during the tumultuous era of
Yeah.
segregation and desegregation.
Oh, wow.
And he paints a stark picture of the resource disparities between predominantly white
Yeah.
and predominantly black schools. His story is a poignant reminder that the fight for educational equity is not new.
Right?
It has deep historical roots.
Yeah.
And those roots continue to shape the challenges we face today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Dr. Reynolds doesn't shy away from the complexities of this issue.
Yeah.
He talks about the anxieties that parents,
Yeah.
especially those from marginalized communities, feel about entrusting their children
Right.
to a system that hasn't always served them well.
And those anxieties, amplified by the pandemic,
Yeah.
have fueled what some are calling a micro-school rebellion.
Wow.
Parents are seeking alternatives, demanding more personalized approaches, and taking greater control of their children's education.
Wow, that's powerful.
It's a fascinating power shift, and
Yeah.
it's raising some really important questions.
Questions like, is this rebellion a fleeting trend or a fundamental shift?
Yeah.
And how do we ensure that this momentum for change leads to lasting improvements for all health students?
Right.
We'll delve into those questions and more as we continue our deep dive. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the impact of the pandemic. It exposed flaws, sparked innovation, and empowered families.
Yeah.
It was a turning point, and the aftershocks are still rippling through the system.
Absolutely, for
Hmm.
sure. That's a perfect segue into our next section, the persistence of inequality. And here's where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit counterintuitive. We often hear that wealthier school districts spend more per student.
Right.
But according to FreeOP's research, that's actually not true in 40 states.
Wait, what? You're telling me that in most states, high-poverty districts are spending more
Yes.
per student than affluent districts.
Yeah.
That goes against everything we've been told.
It does, doesn't it? And it highlights how funding is only one piece of the puzzle.
Hmm.
It's not just about the amount of money,
Yeah.
but how that money is allocated and what factors contribute to these persistent inequalities.
So what are some of those other factors? We've got to unpack this because it's a crucial point.
Absolutely. Residential assignment is a huge one. Families who can afford to live in more affluent areas often have access to better funded schools. But it goes beyond just money. The quality of teachers, access to extracurricular activities, and even opportunities for learning outside of school. All of these things contribute to the complex equation of educational inequality.
It's like this whole ecosystem of advantages and disadvantages that starts early and just keeps compounding over time.
Right.
And speaking of disadvantages, we can't ignore the alarming statistic from a U.S. Department of Education study
Right.
that showed a majority of students from 850 institutions are earning less than minimum wage.
That's a sobering statistic.
Yeah.
And it forces us to ask some tough questions about the value of a college degree in today's economy. Is it still the key to economic mobility that we've always believed it to be? Or are there alternative pathways to success that we need to be exploring more seriously?
Those are questions that Dr. Reynolds seems to be wrestling with as well. He talks about how his own educational journey was incredibly empowering, but he also acknowledges that the landscape has changed. It's not a guarantee anymore.
That's such an important point.
Right.
We can't just assume that the old formulas for success will continue to work in a rapidly changing world. We need to be constantly reevaluating, adapting, and looking for new solutions.
Which brings us to the heart of this deep dive. Reimagining the system. Strategies for meaningful change. And one of the most compelling frameworks for this reimagining comes from the OECD report, which emphasizes the importance of high-quality inclusive education from early childhood all the way through adulthood. It's not just about getting kids into college, it's about lifelong learning and adaptability.
Exactly. And high-quality inclusive education isn't just a nice-sounding phrase. It has real, tangible implications. It means creating a system where every student, regardless of their background or zip code, has access to excellent teachers, engaging curricula, and a supportive learning environment.
Okay, so that's the ideal. But we also have to acknowledge the very real barriers that prevent many students from accessing that ideal. One of the most glaring examples, as the ACLU points out, is the school-to-prison pipeline.
Right. This is the deeply troubling phenomenon where disciplinary practices disproportionately push students of color and those with disabilities out of the classroom and into the criminal justice system. It's a vicious cycle that perpetuates inequality and undermines the very purpose of education.
So we're talking about the school-to-prison pipeline, it feels like. Instead of helping these students, the system is actually pushing them away.
Right.
We need to break that cycle, right?
Absolutely. Reimagining the system has to include creating a more just and equitable approach to discipline. We need to shift from a punitive model to one that focuses on restorative practices, support, and understanding the root causes of behavior.
And as we think about solutions, technology inevitably comes up. It feels like everyone is talking about personalized learning platforms and the potential of tech to revolutionize education.
Yeah, technology certainly has a role to play. Think about the possibilities online learning platforms can give students access to high-quality resources, regardless of location. Adaptive software can tailor instruction to individual needs. Virtual tutoring can provide personalized support. I mean, the potential is enormous.
But I also hear a but coming.
You're right to be cautious. Technology is a tool, not a magic wand. It can amplify both good and bad practices. We need to be thoughtful about how we implement it, ensuring equitable access, providing adequate support for teachers, and remembering that human connection is at the heart of education.
It can't just be about replacing teachers with screens, right?
Exactly. The best uses of technology enhance human interaction, not replace it. And we have to be especially mindful of the digital divide, ensuring that all students have the access and resources they need to thrive in a technology-rich learning environment.
This deep dive has really illuminated the complexities of educational system reform. We've gone from pandemic pods to the school-to-prison pipeline, from ESAs to the potential and pitfalls of technology. If I had to sum it all up, it feels like there's this underlying theme of shifting power dynamics.
That's a great observation. We see it in the rise of parental choice movements, the calls for more localized, controlled experimentation with new models like hybrid schools, which blend online and in-person learning. It's about empowering families and students to have a greater voice in shaping their educational journeys.
And the question that keeps coming back to me is, what role should traditional schools play in this evolving landscape? Can they adapt and embrace these new models, or will they become increasingly irrelevant? That feels like the million-dollar question.
And it's a question that we as a society need to grapple with. There are no easy answers, but I think the sources you've provided give us a framework for having those difficult conversations.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by how much we've covered. We've explored the pandemic's impact, the persistent inequalities in the system, and the exciting but challenging possibilities of reimagining education. But more than just facts and figures, we've heard stories, Dr. Reynolds' powerful experiences, the voices of families seeking alternatives, the passionate reformers trying to create a better future.
And those stories are what make this issue so compelling and so urgent. It's not just about policy debates, it's about real lives, real opportunities, and the kind of society we want to build for ourselves and future generations.
So if there's one takeaway I hope our listeners leave with, it's this. The future of education is in our hands. It's up to all of us to stay engaged, to ask tough questions, to advocate for change, and to support those who are working to create a more equitable and just system for all learners.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This conversation doesn't end here. It's just the beginning.
That's right. Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We hope it sparks some new ideas, some challenging reflections, and a renewed commitment to the pursuit of educational equity.
And if you have any thoughts or insights you'd like to share, please reach out to us. We're always eager to hear from our listeners.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world.